The doctor congratulated Frank on becoming a father, and Henry clapped him on the back, sharing in his friend's happiness. It was a moment Frank would never forget. His long-held dream of starting a family had come to pass. But little did he know, the challenges of fatherhood were only just beginning. Once upon a time, in a big city, there lived a man named Frank. Frank was very rich. He owned a big company. He had lots of money, a fancy house, and everything he wanted. People admired him because he was so handsome and very successful. Frank's best friend was Henry. Henry was also smart, and they often talk about business ideas, new plans, and innovations. But there was one thing Henry always teased Frank about. He would say, "Frank, when will you settle down and start a family? You have everything you need, but no wife or child to enjoy it with." Frank would just laugh and say, "I've not found the right man yet, and I'm not in a hurry." One evening, Frank and Henry were at the bar, sipping their drinks. Frank suddenly said, "You know what, Henry? I think I want a child." Henry nearly dropped his drink in surprise. "A child? But you always said you didn't want to get married." Frank nodded. "I still don't want a wife, but I want a child to carry on my legacy." Henry scratched his head. "But how do you plan to have a child without a woman?" Frank grinned. "There is always a way, and I'll figure it out." Henry suggested adoption, but Frank shook his head. "I want my child to be my own flesh and blood." The next day, Frank started researching on ways to have a child without getting married. He read about surrogacy and sperm donation. He thought long and hard about it and finally decided that sperm donation was the way to go. He could have a child without any strings attached. The next day, at the office, Frank excitedly told Henry about his plan for the sperm donation and surrogacy. Henry's face turned serious as he listened. "Frank, are you sure about this?" Henry asked, concern evident in his voice. Frank nodded confidently. "Yes, I've thought about it a lot and I want to have a child, Henry." Henry sighed. "But Frank, this is a big decision. You can't just rush into it. Think about it carefully before you make your final decision." Frank considered Henry's words. "You are right, Henry. I'll take some time to think about it, even though I know I am sure." That evening, when Frank arrived home, he was surprised to find his mother waiting for him. He had given her a spare key, but he didn't expect her to drop by unannounced. "Why didn't you call before coming over?" Frank asked. His mother smiled. "I just wanted to surprise you, my son." Frank welcomed her and promised to join her after freshening up. However, when he entered his room, he found a young woman sitting on his bed. She immediately grabbed him and tried to kiss him. Startled, Frank pulled away forcefully. Who are you and what the hell are you doing here? His mother entered the room and said, Frank, meet your darling wife to be, Rose. She is the daughter of one of my dear friends, and I want you to marry her. Frank's heart sank. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. Mom, I can't just marry someone you bring home like that. His mother insisted that Rose couldn't leave as she had come with her. Frank was frustrated and left the house in a hurry. That evening, Frank poured out his frustrations to Henry. At first, Henry laughed, but then he thought for a moment. You know what, Frank? Maybe there is a way to turn this situation around, Henry said. Frank looked at him. What do you mean? Henry suggested, why not consider using Rose as your surrogate? Frank's eyes widened in disbelief. But Henry, she's a prostitute, a cheap one at that. I can't entrust her with carrying my own child. Henry nodded. I understand, Frank. Let's think about it some more. There might be another solution. Frank sighed. This was turning out to be more complicated than he had anticipated. He knew he needed to tread carefully and make the right decision for himself and his future child. Days went by, and Rose's attempts to seduce Frank only intensified. She would wear revealing clothes around the house and constantly offered to help Frank with chores. Each time Frank's mother served him a meal, she would claim credit for it. This dish is delicious, Mom, Frank would say. His mother would smile and reply, oh, Rose made it. She's such a talented cook. Frank felt frustrated and betrayed. He stopped eating at home, preferring to grab meals outside. One day, Frank returned home from work. His mother confronted him. Frank, why haven't you touched Rose yet? She asked bluntly. Surprised, Frank replied, what do you mean, Mom? His mother sighed. I can't help but wonder if you are impotent. That's the only reason I can think of why you haven't shown any interest in Rose. Frank was taken aback. Mom, I'm not impotent and I don't want to marry someone I barely know. Not Rose, not anyone. His mother's face fell. But I want grandchildren, Frank. I'm not getting any younger. Frank reassured her that he will give her grandchildren. I will give you grandchildren, Mom, but I need time to find the right person. As time passed, Frank's discomfort in his own home grew. He pleaded with his mother to let Rose go, but she refused, threatening to leave if Rose was sent away. Despite Frank's reassurances, tension continued to build in the house. Frank avoided being at home as much as possible, opting to spend more time at work or with Henry. One day, Frank finally made a decision. He told Henry that he was ready to see a fertility doctor. Henry supported his friend's decision and accompanied him to the appointment. At the doctor's office, they were briefed on the surrogacy process. Frank expressed his preference for a surrogate with a sound mind, wanting to ensure the best possible environment for his future child. After a few days, Frank returned to the hospital to meet the surrogate the doctor had selected for him. Her name was Kate, and she was a young, educated woman with a warm smile. Frank couldn't help but wonder why someone like her would choose to become a surrogate. They went through all the necessary paperwork, and Frank felt a sense of relief, knowing that he was one step closer to fulfilling his dream of becoming a father. Frank would often talk to Henry about the prospect of finally having a child of his own. Henry could see the excitement in his friend's eyes and couldn't wait to see Frank embrace fatherhood. As the days passed, Kate's pregnancy progressed smoothly. Frank spared no expense in ensuring her comfort and well-being. He rented a luxurious apartment for her, hired a chef, a cleaner, and visited her 3 times a week to check on her and the baby. Despite Frank's well-intentioned gestures, Kate began to feel suffocated by his constant attention. She politely tried to express her need for some space, but Frank insisted that he was only doing what was best for the baby. One day, as Kate lay on the bed, Frank gently asked if he could feel her bump. She reluctantly agreed, and as his hand rested on her belly, she suddenly blurted out, "I am only doing this for the money, you know." Frank was taken aback by her candid admission, but chose to overlook it, determined to focus on the positive aspects of the situation. As months went by, tensions continued to simmer between Frank and Kate. While Frank was preoccupied with preparations for the baby's arrival, his mother's persistent pressure for him to marry Rose added to his overall stress. Meanwhile, Kate approached her due date, and Frank decided to move in with her for the final week of her pregnancy. He wanted to be by her side when she went into labor and ensured she received the best possible care. During that week, Frank observed Kate closely and noticed her dedication to her work, even while heavily pregnant. She juggled 2 online jobs and was often on calls with what sounded like her sister. On the day of Kate's delivery, Frank rushed her to the hospital, his heart pounding with excitement and nervousness. He also informed Henry, who offered his support and congratulations. In the hospital room, amidst the flurry of medical staff and equipment, Kate gave birth to a healthy baby boy. Frank's eyes filled with tears of joy as he held his son for the first time, overwhelmed with love and gratitude. The doctor congratulated Frank on becoming a father, and Henry clapped him on the back, sharing in his friend's happiness. It was a moment Frank would never forget. His long-held dream of starting a family had come to pass. But little did he know, the challenges of fatherhood were only just beginning. A few days after Jaden's birth, Frank and Henry took the baby home to the apartment Frank had rented for Kate. Accompanying them to pack her belongings, Kate prepared to leave for good. The night before Kate's departure, she pumped some breast milk for Jaden and handed it to Frank. Later that night, Frank overheard Kate crying in her room. Curious, he approached her quietly. "Why are you crying, Kate?" Frank asked softly. Kate sniffled, wiping her tears. "Having this child has been the most difficult thing I have ever done in my life," she confessed. "I never imagined it would be this hard, and I never imagined I would be a surrogate." Frank didn't know how to respond. He felt a pang of guilt for involving Kate in his quest for fatherhood, but he couldn't dwell on it for long. He excused himself and left Kate to her thoughts, not wanting to get emotionally entangled with her. The next day, Kate packed her belongings and bid farewell to Frank and baby Jaden. Frank was left alone with his newborn son, feeling a mixture of excitement and apprehension. Meanwhile, Frank's mother, unaware of the new development, called him to come home, but Frank hesitated, knowing he couldn't return unless Rose was out of his house. Determined to take care of Jaden on his own, Frank stocked up on baby supplies and food. As nights passed, Jaden's cries grew louder and more persistent. Frank struggled to soothe his son, who seemed to refuse both food and sleep. Frustration mounted as Frank battled exhaustion and uncertainty. When Jaden turned 2 weeks old, Frank made a difficult decision. He took his son home to his mother and revealed the truth about Jaden's birth via surrogacy. Frank's mother was shocked but overjoyed to meet her grandson. However, she was adamant that Jaden needed his mother's breast milk. She urged Frank to find Kate, insisting that Jaden shouldn't be deprived of milk while his mother was alive. Frank explained to his mother that his relationship with Kate was strictly contractual and that he had no way of contacting her again, but his mother remained resolute in her belief that Jaden needed his mother. The next day, Frank confided in Henry about his mother's insistence. Henry listened sympathetically and suggested that Frank should try to locate Kate. Frank was torn, unsure of how to proceed. As Frank grappled with his feelings and responsibility as a new father, he knew that finding Kate was the next step in ensuring Jaden's well-being. Henry and Frank returned to the doctor's office, hoping to obtain Kate's contact. Frank pleaded with the doctor, explaining his desire to reconnect with Kate and sign a new contract for her to care for baby Jaden. However, the doctor explained that they couldn't disclose Kate's information due to privacy regulations. Frank felt defeated but held on to hope that the doctor would find a solution. When Jaden turned 1 month, Frank received a call from the hospital. Excited, he rushed over, hoping to see Kate again. Frank proposed a new contract to Kate, asking her to become Jaden's caregiver for another 1 year. Kate hesitated, explaining that she didn't want to become emotionally attached to Jaden and find it difficult to leave him behind. Frank pleaded with her, mentioning his mother's willingness to do anything to have Kate care for baby Jaden. After some considerations, Kate agreed to move in with Frank and sign the contract. Frank's mother was overjoyed to have Kate take over caring for Jaden. However, Rose, feeling very jealous, decided to leave Frank's house. Frank's mother apologized to Rose and offered her a good sum of amount as compensation for her services. As Kate settled into her role as Jaden's caregiver, Frank began to see her in a new light. He admired her hard work and dedication, especially in the midst of her personal grief over her sister's passing. Frank felt a newfound connection with Kate and couldn't help but fall for her. Kate's presence brought joy and stability to Frank's life. Baby Jaden's cries decreased, and Frank excelled at work, knowing that Kate and his mother were taking good care of his son. Despite their initial agreement, Frank found himself growing closer to Kate, drawn to her kindness and strength. One day, Frank mustered up the courage to express his feelings to Kate through a heartfelt message. He poured out his emotions, admitting that he couldn't imagine his life without her. And to his delight, Kate reciprocated his feelings, confessing that she felt the exact same way. With their feelings out in the open, Frank officially asked Kate to be his girlfriend, and she happily accepted. Frank and Kate continued to bond over their shared love for baby Jaden, forming a happy and loving family. As time passed, Frank confided in Henry about his relationship with Kate and grateful for his friend's support and encouragement. With Henry's blessings, Frank asked Kate to spend the rest of her life with him, promising to love her and build a future together. Frank's mother was overexcited. Kate's heart swelled with happiness as she agreed to Frank's proposal. From that day on, they lived happily ever. Their love for each other grew, and their love for their son Jaden grew stronger with each passing day. The moral of Frank and Kate's story is that love can blossom in unexpected places and situations. Despite starting off with different intentions and circumstances, Frank and Kate's journey shows that genuine love, understanding, and support can lead to an emotional connection and lasting relationships. Overall, the story teaches us that love knows no bounds and can overcome obstacles when nurtured with sincerity and compassion. Thanks for watching this captivating story on African stories and folktales. Please don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell for more stories. Thank you.